Hi, good afternoon to all. Welcome to the second episode of Express Engage, the monthly webinar sequence that Air India Express is hosting for its employees. Today, in the second episode of Express Engage, we have with us one of the brightest minds of this country, a very seasoned management professional who has around 30 years, 3 decades of C-suite experience. A man who worked and consulted with almost, you name any leading corporates in the country or in the Middle East, he either worked with it or consulted them. And he has co-designed and facilitated a design thinking workshop with Professor Srikanth Datta of Harvard Business School, a pioneer in this social technology called design thinking. As we are moving towards the new normal, we strongly believe that social technologies like design thinking has a role to play, a very leading role to play. So when we discussed the topic which needs to be discussed in this second episode, our CEO has suggested that design thinking is something that we all should know as an organization and as individuals, of course, for the benefit of the organization as well as for the benefit of individuals, employees as such. So we are very happy to welcome, we are very happy to have Professor Sunil Sangra. He is now working with the Birla Institute of Management Technology as Professor of Strategy, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Sir, the floor is open to you. We are very keen to listen about this design thinking. We have a sizable population now, around 100 of our employees are there, and people are others are logging in. They are in the waiting room, I could see. So let's start, sir.
Thank you for those kind words, Pragesh, and for that introduction. Right, and I would also like to thank Alok for inviting me to share a few thoughts with you. And thank you to each one of you for taking time out from your busy schedules, because these are busy times. And I know that taking an hour out of your schedule means a lot. And that is why the onus is upon me to try and see how can we make this worthwhile for you, right? So I have a few slides for you, which are going to help me, guide the thoughts that I want to share with you. So I hope they are visible to you on your screens. Pragesh, if you can just give me a confirmation that the slides are visible.
Yeah, Sunil, they are visible. If I can just pitch in here, they are
okay.
visible.
Thank you there. Yeah. So warm welcome, and this is what I hope to achieve in the next 30 minutes or so, which is try and help you understand why is design thinking going to be relevant in the times that we are in, and increasingly in the future that we are getting into, right? Help you try and understand what is design thinking, and share a few examples which hopefully will enable you appreciate why is a methodology like this, a philosophy like this is going to be relevant as we go forward, right? So that's the broad outline of objectives that I hope to achieve. Yeah. Now, we have come from a past that has largely been linear, right? All of you have heard of Kodak. Most of you would have used Kodak's product or products at some point in time or the other. Kodak, as you all know, was the leader as far as photographic film was concerned, right? And more than 100-year-old company, extremely successful, very innovative. At one point in time, they had a dominant a market share. And therefore, a company like this was earning abnormally high profits, right? A very, very successful company. And then what happened was in the year 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. This extremely successful company went bankrupt, right? And there are many reasons to explain this, but part of the explanation lies in the fact that companies like Kodak have continued to operate in a linear way of thinking, working, and doing in a world which is now becoming non-linear, right? Because if you really look at it, in ways the present that we live in, and increasingly the future that we're getting into is going to be non-linear. I'm getting an echo. Is that a problem with me, or do others also have the problem?
Sunil, there is an echo, but I think if you can carry on, probably something has been done to fix it.
Okay, fair enough. So, despite the fact that we are currently in a situation or in times which are non-linear, and we'll see more of this non-linearity as we go forward. In fact, many people are saying the future is not just going to be non-linear, but it is going to be exponential. And therefore, if companies and individuals like you and me, if we continue to operate in a linear way of thinking, working, and doing, in an environment which is non-linear, in an environment which is exponential, then obviously we will struggle to remain relevant to the customers, the stakeholders that we seek to serve and work with, right? And the interesting thing is, at the time when Kodak went bankrupt in the year 2012, there was another company creating a big name for itself in the imaging world. And that is the company that many of you may be using its offerings, a company called Instagram. When Kodak went bankrupt in 2012, Instagram had a value of $1 billion. And how many employees? Only 13 employees, right? So that in a way is a pointer to what the future might look like in many situations. So this gentleman said it a long time back. And think about it for a moment. Perhaps what he has to say is equally relevant at the level of you and me as individuals, at the level of an organization, at the level of a nation, or at the level of a society. It is not the strongest of the species that survives. Companies like Kodak or Nokia or BlackBerry Research in Motion, these were the strongest companies at one point in time in their particular business or industry. It is not about the most intelligent. All of these companies had access to the best brains in the world in terms of whatever they were doing. But it is about the ability to respond to change. And if we can reflect upon this for a moment, and if we can start exploring how can we, as an individual, as a team, as an organization, create this capacity to adapt to the changes that are occurring around us, then chances are that will help us prosper, grow, and remain relevant to the people that we seek to serve, right? So, this is taken from a wonderful book called A Whole New Mind, Why the Right Brainers Will Rule the World, written by a gentleman called Daniel Pink. In fact, those of you who are invested, I would strongly recommend get the book, read it. It will take you about 2.5 to 3 hours to read the book. And it will also be relevant not only for you as an individual, but also for your children and your brothers and your sisters and so on, right? And what Daniel Pink articulates very well in this book is that in the 18th century, it was all about, the agricultural age of the agricultural worker. The 19th century was the industrial age of the factory worker. The 20th century was the information age of the knowledge worker. The 21st century is the age of concepts. It's going to be the conceptual age, right? And over here, what we require to succeed are capabilities or skills in creativity, in our ability to empathize, to innovate, to serve the customers, the users that we seek to address, right? And all of these, creativity, empathy, innovation, all of these are fundamental tenets as far as design thinking is concerned. So perhaps that is another reason why people around the world are increasingly saying, that this is going to be more relevant in the future that we are getting into. A quick step. This is research done by the Design Council in the UK quite a long time back, almost 13, 14 years back. And their research showed that companies which had a strong design philosophy created returns which are double that of the broader stock market over a period of 10 years in the UK, right? Similarly, this is research done by the Design Management Institute, which is based in Boston in the US. and they have developed something called the design value index, which is reflected in the red curve that you see. So if you invested $10,000 in the year 2005 in the broader US stock market, as reflected by the S&P 500, then over a 10-year period, your money would grow to maybe about $17,000. But if you invested that same money at the same time in companies that have a strong design thinking philosophy, a strong design thinking orientation, the companies that are listed here, then your money would grow more than 211% to almost $37,000. So there is a research that shows that the adoption of design thinking has enabled organizations create much greater value as compared to the rest of the business sector. A more recent research done by McKinsey, which again points to the same thing, that organizations which have a strong design orientation have returns which are double that of their peers, right? And even more recent, this is just about a year ago, is this wonderful report that came out from Coursera. And Coursera went on to track which are the most trending skills across industries, across countries. So they covered 10 industries in 60 countries. And the interesting thing is that the number one trending skill in 7 out of these 10 industries in 60 countries is design thinking, right? So, and those industries are there in front of you. So basically there is a growing body of evidence which points to the fact that this is going to be increasingly relevant in the future that we're getting into. So let's try and explore what is design thinking. And at this point in time, may I just also mention that keep your questions and any thoughts or observations you might have, keep them flowing in the chat box, right? Once I finish, which is going to be in about 20-ish minutes from now, then I will try and review all the questions, all the observations, and we'll have a dose. So don't hesitate, please, as we go along. Yeah. So what is design thinking? Let's try and understand that a bit, right? The starting point for design thinking is people, right? If you look at it, any organization, whether it's a B2C organization or a B2B organization or a government organization or an NGO, everything that an organization does is in the context of people. Eventually, we are creations of society. Organizations are creations of society. They are creations for society, right? And society, as you all know, is about people. So people are at the center of the entire design thinking philosophy. How can we start understanding people at a deeper level such that we develop this capability of identifying what might be the unstated, unarticulated needs that people might have? Because there are so many things that people want, but very often they either are not aware of what they want, or they are not able to articulate it as well as companies would want to, right? Therefore, the starting point is, how can we immerse ourselves at a very deep level into the context of the user so that we can unearth what are the motivations, emotions, feelings, pain points that the person is undergoing in a given context? And then how can we use that understanding to see, can we address these issues or these unstated expectations or needs that a user has? So the second aspect is, can we do it? We have identified what a user wants, but is it possible for us to address that in a meaningful way for the user? So that is the second aspect of the design thinking philosophy. And the third is it possible to do it in a way where it makes economic sense, right? And the aim for design thinking, therefore, is to look for innovations which are at the intersection of all three, right? And another book that I would recommend for those who are interested is the book shown here. The title is Change by Design by Tim Brown. And those of you who are interested will find this to be a very interesting book, right? So, in other words, design thinking is about seeking out innovations which are at the intersection of desirability, feasibility, and viability, right? And if we can do those, chances are we're able to create truly compelling propositions for the users and customers that we seek to serve. And remember one thing, when I'm saying users or customers here, I am not necessarily talking about only the end customer or the end user, right? Very often, for example, in an organization like yours, there are internal customers. So you might have a HR process, you might have a finance process, you might have an operations process where the customer being served is an internal department or an internal stakeholder. Even in that context, trying to say design, how can we apply design thinking for improving that process, improving the experience that the user is going to receive at the end of the day, can be equally relevant, can be equally fruitful. So keep that in mind. It's not just the end user, end customer. Even the internal customers can benefit significantly, right? So I have taken this from Stanford University. They have a school called the D School, which is the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford. It is the number one, considered to be the number one institution in the world in the practice and teaching of design thinking, right? So, and this is what their approach to design thinking looks like. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Empathize is all about learning about the audience for whom you're designing, which is what I said earlier, that go into that deeper immersion into your user's context to understand what are his or her feelings, motivations, pain points, and how can we use that, to define or to construct a point of view which might be based on that deeper understanding of users. Once we have done we've been through the empathy phase and we have defined what are the important aspects that a user requires, we bring in a whole new level of ideation into the design thinking approach. I work with audiences, with participants ranging from undergraduate students to CEOs of large companies across the world, right? And any group of, let's say, about 20, 30 people, if I ask a simple question, how many of you think that, you are the creative type? Most people will struggle with the question, like they'll start looking uncomfortable reluctantly. But the fact is, all of us are creative. Think about it for a moment. Do all of us solve problems? We do. The problem can be as simple as, should I have tea or coffee? We solve these kind of problems. The process of solving a problem requires thinking. The act of thinking cannot happen without creativity, right? So we try and encourage teams to truly leverage the creative potential that every member of the team may have. And therefore, we actually celebrate diversity. So we try and have diverse teams which are ideating, which are using their creativity to come out with truly out-of-the-box solutions, potential solutions to the problems that have been defined, right? The next part is how quickly can we bring the ideas that we have into the real world through prototyping. And because, most people will tend to fall in love with the first idea that they have. And the longer they stick with the idea, the more in love they'll fall with it. Therefore, the trick is quickly prototype your idea. And you start with prototypes which are rough, which are low cost, low fidelity. Test them with the user. See how the user is responding, and using that feedback, determine whether you discard the prototype or maybe further iterate with the prototype till you eventually reach what looks like a final solution, right? And in the entire process, as you're developing prototypes, the objective is to test those prototypes with those users. So empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test is really what the design thinking approach. The tenets of, there's this designer at Apple. He used to be at Apple, and his name is Tim Brennan. He was asked, what is design thinking? And this is what he drew. What he was trying to say is that in the initial stages of the design thinking process, there is a very high level of uncertainty. You're not clear about what is the problem that you're working on, and you're still exploring the issue. So uncertainty is very high. In a way, design thinking demands that people start becoming comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. But if you spend a little more time, if you do more research around that problem, certain patterns and insights will begin to start emerging. The idea of a concept or a prototype will take shape. There'll be more clarity, there'll be more focus, and relevant innovation could possibly be the outcome. Yeah. So a simple approach, simple way of explaining what design thinking is. And here are some examples of companies around the world that are extensive users of design thinking. And I think all of you would be familiar with each of the companies that are shown on the screen in front of you. So basically, it's very, very widely used across sectors, across industries, and now across geographies. Yeah. This is what this person had to say a long time back. Steve Jobs was, perhaps one of the most ardent believers and practitioners of the design thinking philosophy. And what he says here is very interesting, that it is not about the big, it is about being innovative, it is about being quick. And that is what the future will require, right? So a few quick examples to help you develop a better understanding of what design thinking is. So, and before we do that, I also want to talk about the importance of experiences, right? We have been moving from a world where bulk of, economic value was created out of extracting and trading in commodities. We then moved on to making products, then moved on to services, and now we are increasingly getting into experiences. Let me help you understand this with a simple example. Let's take coffee as an example. So let us say there is a company which says that we want to do business in the area of coffee. And this company says we are going to trade in coffee beans as a commodity, right? So they buy and sell coffee beans. They are traders. It's a commodity business that they have. And chances are a company like this will create a value of 1x. One more company, once again coffee. And this company says, you know what? We're going to take those coffee beans, roast them, grind them into a powder, put that in a jar, put a label around the jar, and retail it on a store shelf. And maybe this company creates a value of 3x. Coffee once again, and this company says, we are going to serve a cup of coffee as a ready-to-drink hot beverage. Maybe something like, what you get in a vending machine or something like that. And maybe this company creates a value of 5x. One more company, coffee once again. And this company says, we are going to build an experience around a cup of coffee, right? And maybe this company creates a value of 10x, right? So as you start moving from commodities to products to services to experiences, you allow yourself a greater differentiation. Right. And the greater the differentiation that you allow yourselves, the greater is the pricing power that you can command relative to the other players that might be there in the market. Right. So, you can put the answer in the chat box. There is a very simple question I'm asking all of you. And the question is this. If you are in the US and let's say you go to a Starbucks and you buy a cup of coffee there, and you pay $3 for that cup of coffee. Any idea what is the actual cost to Starbucks of that cup of coffee for which you're paying $3, right? So please put your answers in the chat box, and we'll review them once I'm done with the few more things that I want to share with you, right? So experiences are going to be increasingly important. Think about it for a moment. If there are two coffee shops right next to each other, right, and they are identical in terms of the layout, they are identical in terms of the coffee that they serve, but one offers an experience which is more compelling than the other, which one are you likely to be more loyal to, right? And therefore, increasingly, and I think particularly for a business like yours, building those engaging experiences is going to be perhaps the differentiator, given the constraints that you're operating in, but is perhaps going to be the differentiator to see that how do you enhance relevance to a larger number of customers, and how do you do it consistently so that customers will come back to you again and again. Yeah. So here is an example from a company called GE. GE, as you might know, is a very large, diversified company. It's a global company. They have many businesses. And one of the business that they have is in medical equipment. So what you see in front of you is an MRI machine. Now, the people at GE who had developed and designed this MRI machine were very, proud of the work that they did. That, we've designed this machine, it's helping save lives, and so on and so forth. Until one day, one of these designers of this machine happens to be in a children's hospital. And what he observes to his horror is that children are petrified of getting into this machine for a scan. Because they need to lie still on that flat bed. That flat bed goes into the machine. And once the scan starts, the magnets are moving around and they create funny, strange noises, which can be very unnerving for a child. And therefore, almost 90% of the children that needed a scan had to be given a sedative, such that they could remain asleep during the time that the scan was being done. Now, nobody wants a sedative. Adults don't want it, leave it on a child. So these people, this guy went back to his team and said, guys, we've got to do something about this. And what they did was they transformed the entire experience of getting a scan done for a child. They painted the entire room, they painted the entire machine, and they had a series of adventures that they developed. In this case, it was the Pirate Island adventure. So let's say when the child had to get a done, before the scan, they would tell the child, you know what, we're going to play a game. We are actually going to play a game, right? In the adventure, you go to enter the pirate ship and the ship, move the ship, make funny sounds. But if you lie absolutely still, the pirates will not be able to find you, and we'll end up winning the game. And children started, enjoying this entire adventure, and they started looking at the scan no more as a threat, but more as an opportunity to have fun in an adventure that they could actually engage in, right? And therefore, the number of children that were needed to be given a sedative came down by almost 80%, and the throughput of the machine improved on a daily basis, right? Here's another example, a few examples of design thinking in the Indian context. So, not far from Cochin, where many of you are based in Tamil Nadu, is this organization called Arvind Eye Care. It started off in Madurai, and Dr. Govindappa Venkataswamy is the person who started it. Now, if you go and ask a person like Dr. Venkataswamy that, sir, what is design thinking? Chances are he will not be able to respond. He'll look at you quizzically, what are you saying, right? Because chances are he didn't know anything about design thinking. But if you look at the way they have gone about working for their users, for their stakeholders, I think it's a wonderful example of the practice of design thinking. So Dr. Venkataswamy was pained by the fact that why are so many people needlessly going blind because of cataract, particularly in rural Tamil Nadu, right? And when he went deeper into exploring this problem, he realized that many of these people who have cataract in rural Tamil Nadu, they either don't know that they have cataract, which is very easy to treat and operate, or even if they know it, they don't have the means to travel to the city and get themselves operated upon. And therefore, he said, if they can't come to me, I will go to them. And that is what led to the entire mobile eye care clinics and movement that really spread across India based upon the efforts of this one man. Now look at the level of empathy that he had. And that is empathy that he displayed, where he said, there are these people who are in pain, who are needlessly going blind. What can I do for them? Right. And then there are many other examples of how, Arvind Eye Care went about innovating on their processes to ensure that they can bring high quality, world-class quality eye care to people at extremely affordable prices. Not only that, there were many patients who did not have the means to pay for this eye care, for this surgery. And many of these were treated, almost half of these, in fact, were treated free of cost by Arvind Eye Care, by Arvind Nethralaya. And that doesn't mean that they compromised on quality. their quality was, comparable to the best in the world, such as the Royal College of Ophthalmologists in the UK, right? So they offered world-class quality at a price which is affordable, using a business model which allowed them to create a surplus, despite the fact that, my screen has disappeared. Yeah, sorry. Despite the fact that they had this low cost that they were offering to their users and the customers, right? So it's a great example of the practice of design thinking, although people like Dr. Venkateswamy did not know what design thinking is. So my belief is that all of us are born design thinkers. Somewhere along the way, maybe because of parents and family, maybe because of school teacher, college professor, company boss, we begin to start losing this ability of, being curious. So a design thinker is basically curious. It's like a small child wondering about the world around him or her, right? A design thinker allows free expression of creativity. So if you look at a small child, give the small child a sheet of paper and a sketch pen or a crayon, they will scribble something on it, they will sketch something on it, and show it proudly to anybody and everybody in the world as if it is the finest piece of art. Whereas when it comes to us, we are reluctant, we hesitate, right? We suppress the expression of our curiosity and of our creativity. Tell me one thing, have you ever been in a situation where, let us say, you're sitting at work in a meeting, there are 7 or 8 people in a meeting, something is being discussed, and you get an idea, but you do not share the idea, right? My hunch is many of you would have been through that situation, because whenever I conduct these workshops with corporate clients, I always get a very knowing, positive answer to this. People are smiling, and many of them say it happens to us all the time, right? The question to ask is, if we are going to suppress the expression of our creativity, how can we allow ourselves, opportunities for those innovative outcomes that we are seeking, that we are aspiring for our clients and customers, right? So that is the reason why, my belief is that we are all born design thinkers. We just need an environment which encourages us to be a little more free in practicing our curiosity and our creativity, and chances are we might end up surprising ourselves. Another example similar to Arvind Eye Care, which is Jaipur Foot. So the people at Jaipur Foot, they make these artificial limbs, prosthetic devices for people who've lost a limb. Now, many of the beneficiaries that come to Jaipur Foot are daily wage earners. So not only are they challenged in terms of paying for these limbs, these artificial limbs, but also if they're coming from out of town, it means having to stay in Jaipur for 2 or 3 days till the time it used to take to get that limb done. Empathizing with this pain, with this problem that their beneficiaries have, Jaipur Foot, innovated on the entire process. And now, in most cases, the beneficiary comes in the morning, and by middle afternoon, he or she has got that artificial limb and they can walk out, and therefore need not stay for 2 or 3 days in Jaipur and incur that extra cost and lose their daily wages and so on and so forth. So once again, if you ask the people at Jaipur Foot, what is design thinking, chances are they might not know about it. But they are practicing design thinking in what they do on almost a daily basis, right? So now think about it. As we grapple with this new normal that the world has brought upon us, and this is a question which I don't want to answer, but I would encourage all of you to reflect upon it, that how can this learning, this understanding of the design thinking approach, of the design thinking philosophy, enable us be more relevant? Like I said, I do a lot of teaching, right? And I teach undergraduate students and business school students. And this year, what I have done is for the design thinking course that I teach them, I have asked teams to, most teaching has been online, and online teaching is still not perfect, although there'll be a time not too far away where it will be significantly better than what it is today. So I tell these students that, look at the various problems that we have with online education and think about, apply design thinking to see how can we improve online education. And some student teams have come out with some amazing concepts in terms of how to make it better, right? So the point is, think about your own context, think about your own situation, about what is it that the new normal what change is the new normal bringing in your context, and what can you do as an individual, as an organization, as a team, using this philosophy of design thinking, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, to hopefully come out with more innovative solutions to whatever the problem is, and in the process, try and make the world a better place.
Sunil, amazing talk. So much of what you said resonates with me, at least. And, it's a subject which is best probably delivered in a workshop format, but you still made it so interesting. So thank you for that. And Pragesh, can you quickly go through the chat box and see if there are questions?
So, Alok, thank you for that. And I'm quickly running through the chat box. So, why Indian companies, mostly aviation companies, don't want to innovate or do design thinking? My hunch is that Indian companies have begun, not only hunch, I actually work with a lot of Indian companies in helping them develop the capability for design thinking. So I'm doing a lot of work with the Birla group. I'm doing a lot of work with Crystal, with Nomura, with Shaparji Palanji, and other such business groups. And so I think it's gradually coming in. And I'm sure it's going to see deeper adoption in the aviation sector in the years to come. So Lalit has a question, being an employee, how can we be a part of design thinking? Lalit, just think about it. Chances are you are part of a team. Maybe 3, 4, 5 people are there in your team, whatever it is. Think about it for a moment, that tomorrow if there is a problem which is, or an issue that confronts your team, can you do a better job of trying to understand what are the frustrations, the motivations, the pain that your customers are going through? And how can you use that deeper understanding to apply a little more creativity, create an environment of trust within your team such that people feel more free to come out with their ideas, test those ideas with your users and see what works, and hopefully you can start bringing about innovation. The good thing is design thinking does not require too many resources. The most important resources that design thinking requires is your conviction, your willingness, and your time. If you can bring that in, chances are you can start bringing about change. And Prakash, I like your comment about Starbucks. I myself love filter coffee, but there are people in the world who love Starbucks as well, right? And for them, it's turned out to be a great experience. The actual figure is 28 cents, right? What they sell for $3, the cost for making it for them is 28 cents. So they are creating 10 times the value that they are incurring, right? Okay, Pankaj, the company should have different groups for different elements of DT. Pankaj, the more progressive companies around the world are actually on a journey to create design thinking as a competency across the employee base of the organization. And there is a reason for it, right? If you ask people, a simple question, what is innovation? People might say innovation is about a new product or a new process, new way of operating, right? But perhaps innovation is about the creation of new value. And if we start looking at innovation as being about, the creation of new value, then you can create new value in any part of the value chain of an organization. And therefore, every employee in an organization can have a role to play, can participate in the innovation process, right? So it is not just about different groups and different elements. Many organizations around the world are on this journey to create this as a company-wide capability. One example is Procter & Gamble. So P&G is one of the largest consumer product companies in the world. And roughly in the year 2000, 2001, A.G. Lafley became the CEO and chairperson of P&G. He brought in some fundamental transformations to the way P&G operates. One of them was a massive adoption of design thinking. And he was very clear about it, that we have to create this as a capability across the employee base. So today, people in P&G, people don't even use the word design thinking because it is embedded into their DNA, and this is how they conduct themselves in almost everything that they do, right? So,
Mr. Pankaj, who is asking, what is the basic requirement for a company to implement design thinking? Probably how we can change or how we can integrate this into the DNA of a company.
So what I would encourage is start by sharing. There are various tools in the design thinking journey that one can use. Start building the capability in your teams. Maybe start with 1 or 2 teams, and start with what we call the problems which are not too complex, problems which can benefit from people perspective, problems which have room for creative exploration. Pick 1 or 2 of these problems, apply design thinking to those problems. Hopefully you will come out with innovative solutions which resonate well with the users or stakeholders that you're trying to serve. And once you have a couple of successes, showcase those successes across the organization, and hopefully that will then create momentum. I'm a great believer in the fact that success breeds success, right? So start with a few small successes and showcase those. People will get more curious. This team succeeded. What is it that they did differently? Even I want to do it. And then that creates momentum. In fact, that's the practice that I've found working very well with many of the companies that I work with. Yeah.
As it is a people-oriented technology, as you rightly said, it starts with the empathy. A lot of subjectivity is involved in design thinking. So if the problem, different people will see the same problem from different perspectives. So how we will address it when, as this design thinking starts with a lot of subjectivities, as an organization, how we can start adopting it.
Yeah. So in fact, that is something we celebrate, right? We celebrate the fact, and in fact, ideally, let us say if there's a team of 5 or 6 people working on a problem, we would want as much diversity as possible within that team of 5 or 6 members. We will pick diverse people to be part of the team. The reason is that we want to bring in, we want to open up the entire thinking process. So design thinking also follows a process of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. There are times when we will diverge. In the divergence phase, diversity, the subjectivity that you speak of, right, is actually beneficial in broadening the scope of what we are doing or broadening the range of ideas that we are coming out with. And then in the convergent phase, we try and see which are the ones which are going to resonate most appropriately with the users or stakeholders that we are seeking to serve, right? So that is so subjectivity or let's say diversity of thought and perspective is something we actually celebrate. And let us say if you have 5, 7 different views emerging, the question is, how do we determine which is the most appropriate one? The answer lies with your user. Whatever your ideas are, test those with your user. If they are resonating well with the users, that gives you the answer which one to follow and which one to pick.
In fact, I was inspired by this question of Mr. Lalit Kumar Rathi, because Mr. Rathi is one of our from the cabin crew with us. He has asked this: being an employee, how can we participate? You answered that question. But if we look specifically from an airline's point of view, because Mr. Rathi is asking from a cabin crew's point of view, how he or his team can look at his domain.
So think about it. You serve various stakeholders. You serve perhaps the most important is your customers, but then you also serve other people who maybe the ground staff and so on and so forth. Start thinking about what are the pain points, the frustrations, that many of these users that you serve, what are they experiencing, right? And you can do a better job of that by actually getting into a deeper immersion with them, which could be by way of a conversation, a structured conversation in the form of an interview. Very often, observation tells us a lot. Observation can be very powerful in empathizing in a particular situation with a particular group of users. Use that deeper understanding to figure out, to define what are the 2, 3, 4 problems that people are facing, and then allow creativity in your team. Maybe bring in, apart from the cabin crew, maybe bring in other members from the organization to participate in your ideation process. I have practiced this in several organizations, and what I've encouraged teams to do is have something like an ideas Wednesday, right? And let us say every Wednesday between 4 and 6 in the afternoon. I'm just giving you an example. You can structure this depending upon timeframes which are suitable to you. Between 4 and 6 in the afternoon every Wednesday, a team would come up and say, hey guys, we've got this problem. And we invite participation from the rest of the organization to help us ideate around this problem. So they share the context, they share the problem, they share the research that they've done, they make a maybe half an hour presentation or so. And then they use various tools for ideation and creativity. And they tell people, please go wild, come out with the ideas. And, people who've been through my workshops come back to me and say, we actually practice this. And it has resulted in some amazing inputs. In fact, in one team, I remember about 30 people in this organization. The CEO had been through my design thinking workshop, and he called me about 3 weeks later saying that we are planning a 2-day strategy session, and we are thinking of starting the strategy session with an ideation workshop. Can you help us? So we did some research, we framed the problem, identified did some empathetic research, identified what the pain points are and so on. And we got these 30 people together for a 4-hour session, 4-hour creativity and ideation session. And it resulted in 172 ideas coming out for that given situation. Out of those, 40 were identified as having merit, and 15 projects were actually rolled out, resulting in significant growth in many aspects of the organization's working. So the trick is, start small, do it with the full commitment, and trust the process, right? Hopefully, it will result in an interesting outcome and interesting solution, right?
Sir, here is a question from our company secretary, Ms. Aditi Khandekar. She is asking again, do you think frontline employees like flight attendants should be encouraged to interact with passengers to get ideas with respect to regarding design thinking, and how do we do it?
Of course, I mean the frontline staff that you have, they are they know a lot more about what is happening in a passenger's or a user's context as compared to what many of us understand sitting in our offices, right? In fact, traditionally, that's what used to happen in companies. People would be sitting in their offices, could be a team of technologists, could be IT experts or whoever, and they would develop a product, right? And so this is a product we think is going to work very well with our customers, and they would launch it in the market. And the customer would say, hey, but I don't want this, right? And that is the traditional approach that was used in many technology companies, what is called the waterfall approach, and resulting in a very high failure rate. And that is why people said, we have to try and do things which are going to be relevant for the user that we are trying to serve. So in your case, your cabin crew, the frontline, I think knows the customer far better than many of us who might be sitting in our air-conditioned offices. And I would trust inputs and feedback coming from them to see how can we innovate and how can we improve the experience for our passengers based upon the learnings that we can get from the cabin crew. So let's say if you can inspire your cabin crew to get into deeper conversations with some of your passengers, you can start that in a structured way. I would strongly encourage it, right? It could result in a whole, it could result in very, very valuable insights into what is happening. And remember, when you're talking about experiences, you're talking about relating to our users at an emotional level, right? And if you can create that emotional connect with your user and can enhance it with your offerings over a period of time through better experiences and so on, it will result in building better loyalty.
If you look at the chat box, there are a lot of common statements. People are talking about the philosophy, and Mr. Prakash was saying, though you have given the examples of two Indian companies, Netralaya and the Jaipur company, most of Indian companies are reluctant from doing this. He's asking why. And there are many other comments.
So a lot of that is changing, right? You're right. Till now, we have operated in a situation where our markets have been largely protected. We have not really seen the kind of full-blown competition that you see in a mature world, in a mature business economic environment. We are moving in that direction. And as we start seeing more competition, companies will be even more, motivated to explore innovative solutions so that they can be relevant for their customers and stakeholders. And therefore, you will see more of innovation activity happening in time to come, and design thinking playing a bigger role in making that happen. And I'm saying this out of my own experience because the work that I do with the corporate sector, I am seeing more and more demand for these kind of for building these kind of skills and capabilities in the employee bases of organizations. So you're right. Till now, we haven't seen too much of it. But now, whether it's the Tatas, whether it's the Aditya Birla Group, whether you talk about all these large IT companies like an Infosys or a TCS or a Wipro or an HCL, all of them have gone in for a very deep adoption of design thinking.
Sir, as individuals, because you suggested that this lot of schooling has affected the indigenous wiring of our brain, and that creates hindrance to the process of design thinking. As individuals, how we can improve ourselves in, of course, applying creativity to sort out the daily life issues. And books like you suggested, Change by Design. So what can you suggest few books which after this session we can read, and how as individuals we can improve ourselves?
So there were these professors at the Harvard Business School, and they undertook a 6-year-long research project. And the question that they were trying to answer was this: is the ability to be creative, to be innovative, is it God-given, or can we enhance it? Right? And a 6-year-long research project, so very rigorous. They worked with more than 3,000 managers and entrepreneurs in the US. They also worked with twins, twins who had been separated at birth. And their result was, their finding was, maybe about 1/3 of our capability to be creative, to be innovative, is dependent upon our DNA. But the good news is 2/3 is entirely in our hands. And what they found was people who are successful at creativity, being more creative, being more innovative, they practice 5 simple skills. Just 5 simple skills, right? The first one is questioning. How can we be a little more curious and question around whatever it is that we are seeking to innovate for? The second one is observing. How can we be more observant of what is happening around us, of what people are doing in a given situation, in a given context? The third one is networking, right? Which is actually similar to what I talked earlier about diversity, right? So how can we network more with a diverse set of people? What Steve Jobs used to say, connecting the dots. How can we connect seemingly unconnected dots and create, more meaningful, develop more meaningful insights and solutions from those? The fourth one was experimenting, right? Which is akin to what I talked about, prototyping. So how can we quickly experiment with the various ideas or thoughts that we have? For example, Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computers, when he was 14 years old, his parents bought him a new computer because Michael Dell was crazy about computers. So it was his birthday. They went to the shop or the mall, bought the computer, came back home. Everybody was delighted. And the parents were horrified because the moment they reached home, Michael Dell went up to his room and took a screwdriver and opened up the entire computer. Because he was curious about how do computers work. And then once he opened up the computer, the question he asked was, hey, but if you look at all the parts that are there in the computer, and if you buy the parts individually, then the sum of the amount that you pay for buying the parts is basically 20% of the cost of the computer. So therefore, why should the computer cost 5 times the value of the parts? And that's what led to the Dell supply chain model on which Dell Computers originally started, right? So being more experimenting, right? And the fifth one is associating. So whatever you learn from questioning, from observing, from networking, from experimenting, how can you combine all of that? How can you associate all of that? How can you connect the dots to maybe come out with innovative solutions? And now think about it for a moment. Can't you and I be a little more questioning? Can't we be a little more observing? Can't we network more with diverse people? So, for example, in the lunch break, can we make it a point that at least once a week I will have lunch with a colleague from a different department whom I've never interacted with? Right? That's how you create diverse networks. And experimenting and prototyping is becoming increasingly easier and less expensive because of so many technology enablers that are around all of us. So if we allow ourselves the opportunity, we can start practicing all of these and enhance our own capability for innovation.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. And before we wind up at 1 o'clock, would you like to look at the chat box if you want to take any other questions?
So I think I've covered all of them. See, it's the other way around. Okay. So how to make a senior colleague to respond to your creativity? Very interesting question, right? The response to this is really dependent upon the culture of an organization. So I can share with you what Jeff Bezos does in Amazon, right? He has a rule. If an employee comes to you with a creative idea, if you do not accept it, you have to write a 2-page note as to why do you not accept the idea, right? So that's how some people do it. Do you think companies should encourage employees to design better ideas and what company can do for their employees? I think we've covered that. There should be a committee group for acceptance of innovative ideas, how to incorporate them. Yeah, Pratima. So, in fact, once again, I'd gone to this wonderful innovation workshop and the chief innovation officer of Coca-Cola was there. And she said, I call my designation as being the president of yes, right? Because in most organizations, in most traditional organizations, you come out with something new, there is a bureaucracy that will kick in, which will start saying no to almost everything, right? So I treat myself as the person who's spreading this notion of, being accepting, saying, being more open to the various ideas and suggestions that are coming in from the employee base. Okay, this one we have done. Then, is there any entrepreneur who has diversified business, has succeeded through design thinking? So, Sylvester, if you were to, there's Steve Jobs, etc., are well known, but more recently you might have heard about Airbnb, right? Airbnb, the promoters of Airbnb, the founders of Airbnb, have attributed their entire success to an adoption of the design thinking approach, right? So that's an example which we share very frequently with our students these days, because they have said it openly that our success has been driven by the design thinking approach. And most entrepreneurs today, when they start out a new venture, a new business, I think their initial work is very deeply rooted in the design thinking philosophy. Yeah.
I think we have covered all those questions, sir. And it was such a wonderful session. I do not know how we will thank you because we were under the impression that we will be changed by the pandemic. But now we are sure that we will be changed by design. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Pragesh. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being so patient. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the talk. And on behalf of everyone at Air India Express, let me express my gratitude and my thanks once again. We'll catch up.
Thank you, Alok. Thank you for inviting me. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.